Hello there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I'm Vlad, and this is episode 51 of season 15. I usually say it the other way around. I'm live with Mike Carson, not Mike Garson, who is the famous piano player who played with David Bowie, but the Mike Carson, who is now the CEO of Friendster. You know, Friendster, the project that came before Facebook and Hi5 and everything else that we used as teenagers. But also nowadays he's working on Impervious, of which he's also the CEO. He's interested in domain names, he's interested in digital identity, and I guess we have a lot of stuff to riff on right now because it's an important topic and Bitcoin can be at the center of this revolution in identity on the internet. So hi Mike, it's good to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be on this show. I love your podcast. I think it's my favorite Bitcoin podcast right now. So
Really?
thanks.
What have you
Yes.
been listening to?
Well, I listened to the merch one that you just had, and I listened before that. I listened to you had the CEO of Starkware on there, and I had heard your podcast before, but recently I got back into it, and it's definitely It's like you have really great content. So yeah, it's definitely my favorite Bitcoin podcast right now. The only other one I really listen to is I subscribe to Andreas Antonopoulos on Patreon, and he does some shows like for his Patreon members. So I like that too. And Andreas is good, but thanks for having me.
It's an honor to be compared, not necessarily compared, but be somehow on an equal level with Andreas because I know he did a lot for the stuff and for the space, a lot for the space, not for the stuff. And I got excited because I met him in Prague last year and he was super nice and I gave him one of my magazines and I'm really proud that I get to do something which I first watched him doing, you know? But
Yeah.
I gotta ask you right now, why should we bother with digital identity? Because we have this beautiful KYC AML system, right? You put your ID online, it's simple. This person is exactly who they say they are on the ID card. Everyone's social security number is already leaked on some darknet right now. So why should we bother with all of this? Why should we think about how we can decentralize identity and use digital identity on the internet?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And it's something that, so I've been thinking about this for years. And so I'll try to answer the best I can from that standpoint. But I mean, so the main thing that Spaces is covering is naming. So it's being able to, like, similar to a username or a user ID or a domain name, it's being able to have that in a decentralized way. And the main reason I got into this, I mean, we could go into that at some point, but I was really into domain names. I started a company, Park.io, and through that, I owned 3 ICANN accredited registrars and worked with domain names. But what it made me realize is that, like, Bitcoin was a revolution for money. To me, it's a revolutionary invention for money. But like, and a lot of people in Bitcoin talk about how money is fundamental to our society. Like, if there's one thing that is really important to be decentralized, it's money. But one other thing that's really important is naming. Like, we all have names. Like, cities have names, companies have names. There's names everywhere. Like, you can't just refer to like a city by like geo coordinates, and you can't like refer to domain, like websites, just by their IP address. Like, naming is super important, and right now it's pretty much all centralized. It's all under a centralized control. And so through this whole process, like, I came to realize that, like, names can be digital assets, and they should be decentralized too. And it's super important for a lot of different reasons. Freedom of speech, uh, and so yeah, that's kind of where we came with how I came to work on Spaces.
So, what is Spaces? Because you made a very abrupt introduction into it. I did mention Impervious, which is the greater project that has lots of sub projects. I don't know how to describe them, branches that it develops. I did take a look at your website. And Spaces is something which, if I'm not mistaken, is already on the Bitcoin Signet. And it's in
Yes.
testing phase.
Yeah, it's on testnet 4 right now. So yeah, so I started after Park.io, I started Impervious to work on decentralized naming. And at first we were focusing on Handshake, which is another decentralized protocol that has its own blockchain. It's a fork of Bitcoin. So we worked on that a while, and then we also did some stuff with ENS throughout all that. But after after working with that, I came to realize that like it really, I think that it would be really important to have a naming system on Bitcoin for a couple different reasons. One, it's by far the strongest proof of work blockchain, and it has the most it's the most secure decentralized ledger out there. So why would you put decentralized naming on anything else? And two, Bitcoin needs it. Bitcoin needs a naming system. Like there's things that, like for example, Matt Coralla just like did BIP 353 with the human-readable like wallet addresses, and in that he talks about like, well, we shouldn't rely on another blockchain like ENS, and so the best thing right now is the DNS. But DNS is totally centralized. It's completely centralized. So like Bitcoin could really use this. Bitcoin itself can really use this for a lot of different reasons, for security. So yeah, so Impervious was working on these other things, and then we were like, we really got to do this on Bitcoin. So we spent like a year working on this, just focusing 100% on Spaces, this new protocol built on Bitcoin, and we wanted it to be 100% cypherpunk. That was the ideal. That's the ideals, like 100% cypherpunk. So no separate blockchain, no token, no pre-mine, no foundation, 100% cypherpunk. So, and also lightweight on Bitcoin. Like we didn't want to leave a large footprint, like clogging up all the block space and stuff. And, scalable, and all the things that we've come to learn from the different protocols and domain name system and stuff. So we took all that and we really worked to make Spaces. And so that's where we are now. We were able to raise some money to build it out, and now yeah, we're live on testnet 4, and we're hoping to go live on mainnet in the next month or so.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you think about it, this conversation about domain names, and that's what DNS is about. It's a domain name service. This conversation was being held back in 2010, and Satoshi was around when they were talking about this, decentralizing domain names. And they created Namecoin, and Satoshi Nakamoto somehow took part in, let's say, the philosophical creation of it. And he was also the one who encouraged the people wanting to do this to start another blockchain that's gonna be merge mined with Bitcoin. Instead of putting everything on the Bitcoin blockchain, they said at the time that it's much better to create a separate network. Eventually, I think that Ethereum became what Namecoin was supposed to be, with some extended functionality. Namecoin right now, I'm not sure if there's anyone still running nodes or maintaining the domains that were purchased at the time. But to me, it's interesting that at the end of the day, it came back to Bitcoin. But I think technologically right now, the way in which these domain names are put in the Bitcoin blockchain is more compressed, is much more block space efficient than it was back in the day. I think these ordinal inscriptions, I'm not sure if you use ordinal inscriptions, but that's one of the most efficient ways to put data into the Bitcoin blockchain in a rather permanent way.
Yeah. So Namecoin is a good, that was the first thing. And it's I think that shows like the importance of naming, is that the first altcoin was Namecoin. And Namecoin, like basically we built Spaces on the shoulders of all these other, people who went first and, tried to do this naming system. And I think Namecoin, at the time you can't do Spaces on Bitcoin at that time, in 2010, because it's not scalable. Like you can't scale to like hundreds of millions or billions of names on Bitcoin at that time. Like it just wouldn't work. So it made sense having it as a separate blockchain. But I think there was, the main issues, there's a paper actually, like a academic paper on like exploring why Namecoin, didn't work out. And their conclusion, the main conclusion is that it was a problem with distribution, and that you could register, tens of thousands of names for little cost. And so it was kind of like squatted on, the whole thing was squatted on. And then it was really hard for people to get names and use it from there. So, we took all that stuff into, consideration when we were building Spaces. And yeah, ENS, ENS is, we've worked a lot with ENS. And they've been really super successful in a lot of ways. In terms of like financially, I think they're doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in registrations and stuff, and they had lots of registrations. But it's not Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin needs its own. It's also, from a domain, coming from my work with like ICANN and the traditional domain system, it's not really scale, like it doesn't scale. It's all under .eth. It's under one top level domain .eth, and it's and then there's other issues with like Ethereum. Is it you have to use it like something like Infura or something. Like it's hard to get the whole blockchain, like verify it yourself. So anyway, we wanted to do something clean and cypherpunk and on Bitcoin. So that's why we've done Spaces.
Yeah, I think you opened up the Pandora's box for two conversations to be had about domains. The first one concerns ownership of domains, because if you deal with ICANN, it sort of belongs to you, but at the same time it can be taken away from you for political reasons. You're not really censorship resistant. And there's also the issue of permanence, because you mentioned the issue of Ethereum nodes not being able to store all the data forever. There is some trust involved that these companies like Infura or whatever are going to be storing everything that you want and that you expect in the future. But you have no guarantee of that unless, and this is the sovereign way, you're going to be running your own node to make sure that this stuff stays online forever. And that's a big problem. With Bitcoin, you have some technical limitations. You have higher transactional costs. But at the same time, you have a guarantee that whatever goes into a Bitcoin block is going to be there forever.
Yeah. Yeah. For your first point with the censorship, yeah, I mean, just domain names, they're totally, there's so many people, there's like literally hundreds of people who have access to your domain name, from the registrar, like if you buy it at GoDaddy, the registrar, the registry, ICANN, and anyone, anybody in between, any of the employees. There's an example, .cat is a top level domain for Catalonia, and their offices were raided by the Spanish government because some websites were posting anti-Spanish government stuff. So the offices were raided. Domains, some .cat domains were taken down. The CTO, I think, was arrested for sedition. So I mean, that's just one example. And this is just domain names. I mean, like look at usernames, like on Twitter, like I mean, the president, Donald Trump, was taken down. So like, if they can do it to the president, they can do it to anybody, really. And so you don't like why should there be middlemen? Like why should there be people, hundreds of people in between you and your name? Like you should be able to own this. Like what? There's no reason. It's the same with money. It's like, a lot of people will be like, it works fine, but a lot of people will say that about money. Like, my bank, I can go to the bank and I get my money, it's fine. But like, why should there be banks in between and everybody else in between you and your money? And why should there be people in between you and your name? There should not be. There's no reason. And so, yeah, that's the main reason we built it. And I mean, that's just like the censorship stuff. There's also security stuff. Like if you look at the Squarespace, like you have to trust not only that they won't take it away, but that they're secure. Like, why should you have to rely on that they'll secure? And that affected crypto. Like from what I know from that incident, the Squarespace incident, like it affected crypto companies, and money was stolen from like because hackers were able to hijack their website. So you have to rely on that. And then there's other things, like for example, certificates, like all traffic on websites using HTTPS, you have to get a certificate from a trusted third-party certificate authority. So you're basically getting a certificate from a trusted third party. And so it's like signed, it's signed with somebody else's keys, really. So yeah, this fixes a lot of those issues. And your second question, what was your second part of your question? Oh, about ENS and storing the data. Yeah, like and why using Bitcoin? Yeah, Bitcoin. I mean, obviously, like Bitcoin, the whole it's relatively simple to like download the whole blockchain and verify everything yourself. And so it's in that way it's a lot more decentralized than something like Ethereum, where you kind of have to rely on third parties, or if you try to do it yourself, it's just a lot more difficult. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It's useful to expand upon these arguments because there are some layers to this, and some people will be listening and saying, why do I need Impervious's spaces? It makes no sense. I have this icon, I just go on GoDaddy, I register a domain for $2 a year, and they're gonna be happy with it, and they're gonna think that it's just good enough for their use case. But they don't really own it, and that's an important talking point. And I did take a look at your protocol. It's on your website, and it seems to be very basic. It looks a bit like JavaScript, the way in which you register domains. Whenever you launch this, I want to register bitcointakeover.com or whatever it's gonna be, .badass, or I'm not sure what the extension is gonna be for this. But if one of you assholes listening to this is gonna squat on my domain, I'm gonna hunt you, I'm gonna track you down, I'm gonna make sure that I get that domain, okay? Because someone already has bitcointakeover.com and they tried to sell it to me, and I just told them I'm not gonna pay that much for it.
Well, yeah, actually, that might be a good segue to explain spaces a little bit, if that's okay with you. Like, so there's top level spaces, and then there's subspaces. So the only thing that's done on Bitcoin itself is the top level spaces. So like if you wanted to get Bitcoin takeover, you could just you could open an auction for it and it's on Bitcoin itself, and you just do transactions to open the auction and place the bids, and then you get it that way. And then so there's no dot after it. And the syntax is like at Bitcoin takeover. So you could get that. And then you could, if you wanted, you could sell subspaces. Like you could sell like, Vlad it, or you could just create it yourself, or you don't have to sell, you could give it away free or whatever, but you could do it that way. So yeah, it's similar to traditional domains in that there's a top level and then a second level underneath. And this is for scaling reasons, because we didn't, in order to not like completely take up all the block space and stuff, you need to limit what's committed to the block space. So it's just top level, and we've limited the number of top level spaces that can be registered per year to like a small amount, like 3,600. It's basically 10 per day can go. So yeah, so that's kind of how it works. And auctions, so like if you bid on this, on like Bitcoin takeover on spaces, and you get it, the winning bid amount is burned. It's just gone forever. So it doesn't go to us in any way or anything like that. I mean, we did it that way because we wanted to, it to be cypherpunk. And it's we thought about other ways, like perhaps having the winning auction amount go to miners or something like that, but it just didn't work. It became more complicated. And so the cleanest way right now seems to be to just burn the money, burn the Bitcoin.
I do look forward to trying this, and I do have a bit of a question about how this is going to work practically when you buy a domain, how you can access it. But before that, I gotta tell people all about today's sponsors. The first one is Sideshift.ai. Let's say that someone pays you in stablecoins and you're not happy, and you can't convince them that they should send you BTC or whatever you want to save or spend with. Dump that CBDC wannabe for something that you deem more valuable, which is free market money that you can actually hold in cold storage and cannot be censored by the Tether company, by going to Sideshift.ai. They have a pretty nice interface. There is no registration that's required. You can just swap instantly with very low fees. It's pretty cool. I recommend it. I use it myself for some swapping. And also there is Starkware, which develops the Starknet network. And what they do basically is to have this zero knowledge proof rollup that they currently do on Ethereum and they want to bring to Bitcoin. It brings pretty nice scalability and privacy in one package. And all we have to do in Bitcoin to get that is to activate Opcat, which is a very basic concatenation operational code. It's 13 lines of code, initially written by Satoshi. It was removed by Satoshi in 2010 along with other opcodes because he was concerned that there are gonna be infinite loops of data that are gonna get concatenated until they crash the nodes. But in the post-Taproot era, it's safe to use Opcat because there is a limit to the amount of data that can be added to this. And it's not just me saying this, it's Andrew Polstra and a bunch of big brains who are much more qualified to make these assessments, and they published articles, and there's a lot of content out there that you can consume on the topic of Opcat, but it is the sort of upgrade that's very non-contentious, I guess, because if you want to break it, you can break it on BCH, you can break it on Liquid. They have it and have had it for years. So think about that. If you want builders to create interesting stuff on Bitcoin, think about activating Opcat. So now back to the question that I had for you, Mike. If I buy a domain, how do I type that in a browser? Is there some sort of special extension that's going to be required for me to be able to access the web page? Or how is it going to work in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. So far, we built it. We've been really focusing on the protocol and making it a generalized naming system so that it can be used for a lot of different things. And we have, the paper. If you go to spacesprotocol.org, you can read the paper and see what we have created for the second level spaces solution, which uses zero knowledge proofs to scale out all the subspaces. And then, there'll be like a peer-to-peer network where you can store data on for these names, for these subspaces. So you could store like whatever you want, like point the name somewhere. Like you could use the name to point to an IP address, set up DNS, or you could use it to like point to a onion address, or you could use it for Noster, or like BIP353, using it for a payment address for Bitcoin. So yeah, we don't have the stuff isn't built yet to integrate it into like a browser or anything like that. So we've really just been focusing on the protocol and making sure that it works, really well. And then after we launch to mainnet, and then we're hoping to build out some of the ways to integrate it more.
I think it's important, and there are at least 2 or 3 open source browsers to which you can build extensions. And make sure that when someone types at Bitcoin Takeover, it gets to the Bitcoin takeover page. But I still think that, so how is it going to work? Can it be a redirect to something that already exists and is registered by ICANN, or can you build a web page on top of this domain? And if that's the case, then how are you going to link them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you can like it's pretty wide open what you could be able to do with it. But like you basically you can store data for a name. So you can store anything on this like peer-to-peer network. So you could store DNS records. So you could point it, or you could store like an onion address and have it go, right to you know, uh that, and or like Noster, you could use it for Noster. So it's basically the way you'll be able to look up on the peer-to-peer network and look up an entry and verify using the zero knowledge proofs really quickly that the person who that the data stored is owned by, that the key matches, that they actually own this name, and that this is the data for that name, and then you can use it however, like however it's integrated. When we were working on Handshake and ENS and stuff, we actually created a browser, Beacon web browser, and it used it would look up the names on Handshake or ENS and resolve them. It was like the first browser that resolved ENS names using DNS. So it wasn't like a redirect. Like most names on ENS, like a .eth, they just redirect to a traditional ICANN domain. But there is actually built into the ENS resolvers a way to use DNS. So you don't have to like redirect. You can actually use like DNS. And it's good because then you don't have to rely on a trusted third-party certificate authority to encrypt the traffic. So you can so there's this protocol called Dane where you can uh, encrypt the traffic without using a third-party certificate authority. We were the first browser that did that. So yeah, we may integrate this into the Beacon web browser, or try some of these other ways. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it is very important because at one point people will be buying these and expecting to build web pages. The most basic use case for these domains is to redirect, and they're just for vanity, for people who want to buy maybe the short form of their domain, or maybe they could not buy from ICANN the domain that they wanted, so they will be using one that they do want and that they like to redirect to the one that they have. But at the same time, it's important to also build from scratch, to have this community of people who are creating an ecosystem around these domains. Because if it's only for redirecting purposes, it doesn't really defeat the Hydra, you know? You don't win the battle against centralized systems if you're just an interface that leads towards them. But if we do have builders, it's gonna be much more fun and much more disruptive. And I can think of a few ways in which maybe I can build a simple web page just to have fun and make people listen to my podcast. Just don't squat on my domain, please.
Yeah, I mean we build it in a way that makes it really hard to squat on the names. There's a 10-day auction. Also, any bids in the last day extend the auction by 1 day. So it'll be pretty hard to, we took that really into consideration when we were designing the system. But yeah, back to the question of like integrating. I mean, I think BIP 353 would be a really good starting one, is like being able to have human readable like payment addresses and stuff. I mean, that solves like that would help in a lot of ways for some things. Like for example, I don't know the exact details of this, but I know there was like a protest in Canada with the truckers and stuff, and people were donating like a GoFundMe page with you know, and but then I think GoFundMe was like, we're not going to give the money to the truckers. We're just going to distribute it to whoever we want to. And so, like, I think having a human readable name would make it a lot easier to be like, just send money to like truckers at fund or something. You could send, so it makes it a lot easier to do that type of stuff. But it's a simple first step to get this integrated. And actually, you don't even need to send, like if you get Bitcoin takeover, if you get that top level space, like people can send you, you don't even have to set anything up. People can send donation or whatever to that using our current software that we have. Like you can just, using our wallet that we've created, you could just send, a Bitcoin to Bitcoin takeover, like at Bitcoin takeover. But using subspaces, you'll have to do it a little differently because you have to use the zero knowledge proofs and stuff like that. But yeah, I think so. Anyway, for me, I think I do, like, I came from the domain system, and I think that's a really important part of this. But I think there's also some other like integrations that are exciting and maybe a little more simpler at first, is like doing this payment stuff and also maybe integrating it with Nostr. I just saw an interview, I think, with Lynn Alden, talking about how you could use Nostr and Lightning, and it was it's like similar to Venmo. It's like, this is basically Venmo, and it is like Venmo except no usernames. It's Venmo without the usernames. And so Spaces makes it exactly like, if you integrate Spaces, then it is, it's a decentralized Venmo. So so that's another thing to integrate it. But yeah, eventually, I mean, we purposely made this general purpose decentralized naming. So eventually I would like to see integrations in a lot of different areas. But I mean, the promising thing, so we have open source software. If you go to spacesprotocol.org, everything's open source. You can go to our GitHub and see everything that we've made. And you can read all the documentation that we have if you want to like integrate this. And I've been going around to like BitDev meetups and stuff, and the response is really positive from the Bitcoin community. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the integrations that people build and stuff.
Yeah, I do know that Paul Storz built, I think it's called Bitnames, which is sort of a Namecoin fork for his DriveChains project. And he does want to have this sidechain that is dedicated to only having domain names and tokens and assets and everything that's connected to this. And the way in which it's going to work is that it can be merged mined with Bitcoin. So the same miners that secure Bitcoin are also going to secure that chain. At the same time, there's not the same guarantee of permanence. So the base layer is going to be there forever, but if you want to use something lesser expensive and more scalable that enables you to get as many domains as you want and I guess bypasses some of the limits imposed by the base layer, you'll be using that one as a sidechain. Anyway, I am also sponsored by Layer 2 Labs, and they have this proposal for scaling Bitcoin, which is BIP300. And most people, I think, mischaracterize it as some sort of block size increase for sidechains, because instead of moving transactions on the base layer, you're going to have these sidechains for other stuff. But I see it more as a way to drain altcoins of their use cases, because I believe that there is some legit activity that's happening in the altcoin space. There's a lot of useful experimentation that's happening. And after the experimentation phase, there is a market that builds around these use cases. And the fact that we don't have that on Bitcoin only gives these projects more legitimacy to say, yes, but Bitcoin can't do this. And if Bitcoin is able to get all the builders and basically copy and paste the open source code into a sidechain that has more thermodynamic security and more value, I guess most of these altcoins are gonna die off. So that's why I think if we do want a future where everything is built on Bitcoin, something like DriveChains is useful. And if you want to check them out, there's already a testnet version of these sidechains that you can download right now. You go to layer2labs.com and you're gonna find all the information you need to do this. I think it's on Linux, Windows, Mac OS. You just download the software and you see how it works to understand much better what the future holds for this project. It's not just an idea, right now it's in implementation. And also I gotta tell you about hodling.ch, which is this service from Switzerland where you go and you get consultancy for your setup. So if you are into self-custody, and of course you should be into self-custody, but this is a bit more professional. If you want to do a multi-sig for a company or you have a very large bag and you don't want to be subjected to the $5 wrench attack, I think it's still $5. I haven't checked lately. Due to inflation, it might be 10. But if you don't want to be subjected to that sort of physical attack, it's a good idea to maybe do a multi-sig and maybe to have some sort of distributed backups. Maybe you should use hardware wallets, maybe you shouldn't. The best way to know is to call these guys and they're gonna give you their best expertise. And they hold no keys. They're not like Casa where they demand that you give them one key for backup or whatever. They will help you and tell you exactly how you should manage your backup, and you benefit from the privacy of a Swiss service. So check out hodling.ch. I'm done with calling sponsors for today. Thank you for sitting through my ads. And now let's talk about digital identity, because this is a very important concept and it's also a very poorly understood concept. And I think in the beginning, people assumed that a Bitcoin address or an Ethereum address or something like this is enough to prove that there's the same person behind the activity. And you can sign a transaction, you can sign from an address to prove that you are the owner. But I don't see this as being enough. I think it has some limitations. It is much better than KYCing with your ID, which only leads to criminals stealing your data at one point. It's just a honeypot. But I don't see this future with single addresses. For one person, you have one address and then you can see their transactions, or maybe you don't see their transactions, but if they do sign messages or transactions from that address, you know that it's them. Do you see any merit or potential in this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a naming protocol can, yeah, it, be a help for that, because it's basically what it comes down to. What it really boils down to is that it ties a name to a key, so you can prove that you can prove that you're the owner of that name. And so whatever you do with that name, you can it you can prove that you own that name. So yeah, I guess I don't know. I I think it's because tying it to an address, yeah, you don't, because that has privacy issues and stuff like that. So I think uh, um, yeah, you can do, like, for example, like silent payments or something like that with using just this your space's name. But I I think uh, um, yeah, I don't know if that's I don't know if I answered your question really.
No, it's fine. For many people, I think the first Bitcoin that they found was domains, because they were able to buy domains for maybe a few dollars and then they could sell them for thousands, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars later, because they met projects that raised funds, or maybe they dealt with larger organizations or startups or government institutions that wanted these domains. And it was a pretty profitable way. And you see spaces beyond this initial phase where everyone registers the domain that they want. Do you see a marketplace potential? And if so, what's gonna be the user interface like? Is it gonna be like GoDaddy or something that we already have? Or did you design it in a different way with a slightly different philosophy to be adapted to Bitcoin's design?
Yeah, I definitely think there will be a marketplace. I mean, there's going to be a value for, you know, easier to remember or more highly sought after names like Bitcoin, like at Bitcoin. If you can get the top level space for that, it seems like that will be super valuable. But so I definitely think that the similar to anytime there's naming involved, like domain names or even Twitter handles and stuff like that, you see a marketplace for valuable names. For branding or just for easy to remember or shortness of it, so that basically so it's easy to remember and put in places. So I think there will definitely be a market for that. And the interface, I mean, right now we just we have command line software that we built that has a wallet for that, but we're working on a GUI wallet, so it'll be easier, like software, so that people can be easier to bid and manage your spaces and stuff. And then for the subspaces, we'll have a service for that, so that, for example, if you get the top level at Bitcoin, if you get that top level space, you can use our website or service so that you can sell subspaces under that. So you could sell, like somebody could get Mike at Bitcoin or Vlad at Bitcoin or whatever. And so you could actually turn it, into a business where you sell subspaces and you make money from the sale of those. And we'll have a website that helps provide the service for that. So it can, people can easily go on to the website or register second level spaces under that. And we'll provide the service of creating the zero knowledge proof, so that it's all handled for you, so that you don't have to do it yourself. You could do it yourself if you wanted, but yeah, so that's our plan.
I mean, it sounds very promising, and I'm excited for this. But there are so many domain services that have been released in the last few years, and I haven't heard much about them. So I hope that this one is gonna be successful. I remember at one point I was invited on the Bitcoin group, which is the podcast by Thomas Hunt, Mad Bitcoins. It's pretty OG. He has an assembly of guys who have been in Bitcoin for longer than
Yeah,
10 years. And after the show, there was someone who mentioned that there's this protocol where you can buy emoji domains.
yeah,
So basically, you could buy smiley face with tears domain, and you could get subdomains for that one. And people were paying a lot of money for them, except that it had no proper browser integration. So it was all highly speculative. You had no guarantee that at some point in the future it's gonna be used for anything. And I don't think it had any success. I don't know what happened to it. This was back in 2021, so it
yeah,
was at the peak of the NFT mania, and everyone was trying to get collectibles and trying to find something to make 100x on.
yeah, yeah. You make a really good point. I mean, when I bring this up to people in the domain industry, they're like, "Oh, another blockchain solution to naming." Like what, uh, well, a lot of them are like, we don't need that. We don't need blockchain. But like, from my perspective, like going through my, I started Park.io 10 years ago, and I worked with ICANN. I had 3 ICANN accredited registrars. I worked with registries. I worked with the .io registry, .ai, and like going through all that, you know, I I I came to the realization, and also at the same time, really getting into Bitcoin. Like I got into Bitcoin in 2013, and you know, yeah, I I got into Lightning too. We were one of the first. Park.io had one of the first 50 nodes on the Lightning network, and so through all this, like I realized that like domain names are digital assets, and they really should be on the blockchain. Like to me, I've had this strong conviction that decentralized naming is so valuable and so necessary that it's inevitable. It's definitely going to happen. And I think, And we're still in the very early stages. It's like we're figuring this all out. Like it's new. It's all new. So we're all just trying to figure out the best solution. First there was Namecoin, then there's these other things, and so we spent a long time, just focusing on trying to build because of this conviction, trying to build the best solution possible. Like we worked like, and I self-funded it for the first year or so, and it's like just to build it. It's really just to try to do, because I know this is gonna happen. It's just not, there's no way we're gonna live in a world in like 20 years from now where all the names are centralized. Like it can't happen. Like I just know it can't happen. And so we just worked on this to try to build the best solution. And what we came up with, who knows if it's the best solution. I personally think it's the best solution so far, but if something comes along that's even better, then I'll be interested in that one. I just want to know what the best thing is. Like I just want to work out the best system. But I think that we're still like in the first inning of this decentralized naming stuff. Like we're figuring it out, but like you can already see the value. Like you can see like ENS doing hundreds of millions of dollars, and another company, Unstoppable Domains, which is, I don't know if it's, I don't think it's really decentralized, but they were valued at $1 billion or whatever. So I think the market and the sees the value of this, like, and knows that it's super valuable, and it's really just a matter of time and getting the right solution. So even though there's been a lot of different solutions that have come out, there's going to be a solution that is the right solution, the one that works. And I personally think it should be built on Bitcoin, because of the security of the block space. I mean, where else would you put it? Where else would be a secure decentralized? So, and Bitcoin needs it anyway. So that's where we came to this solution. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it won't be the one, but we did our best. We worked hard to try to make it the one, and maybe some other people will learn from us and do something even better. So.
Well, it's hard to break monopolies, and it's hard to get people to move from something that's so convenient and so heavily advertised. Something like GoDaddy is advertised at the Super Bowl, and everyone knows about it. I think the one that I used was Gator something, HostGator. At one point, I registered some domains with that. Right now, I use some Romanian company just because I thought it was nice to support a smaller project, but they still resell, They're buying from ICANN and they're reselling to me, and there's this Romanian authority of .ro domains, which is in charge of everything, and it sort of sucks. I wish there was something decentralized for this and we could bypass the middleman and we could bypass the censorship. But I think what it takes is to build communities and to have a sort of network effect.
Yeah.
Because you are also the CEO of Friendster, if I'm not mistaken. And you know how hard it is for that project to compete with Facebook, with Twitter. We saw how Elon Musk messed up a lot since he took over Twitter and made a lot of controversial decisions. And this enabled basically Meta, which is the mother company of Facebook and Instagram, to come up with their threads. But that one, even though it had some support from celebrities and people who were mad at Elon Musk, it still did not get the user base. So there needs to be a way for these projects which are decentralized to have a community that backs them, to have people who use them and understand the utility. And I do expect, once this one goes on mainnet, for some people to complain that these are not financial transactions that are being put in the Bitcoin blockchain. Say, oh, this is a money network and you're putting your graffiti on it, just like with ordinal inscriptions when they're inscribing their JPEGs. So I do encourage everyone listening to this to be open-minded about domains, because this can be very revolutionary and useful. But my question right now is, how is it going to work, in the sense that you mentioned ENS a few times? And as far as I know, the only way in which ENS was useful was to have a vanity address for your wallet, so that people could see what you store, what you transact, and stuff like that. So do you think it's also going to be used for this, with people opening up their wallet addresses to people? Does it work the same in a UTXO model?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, just to talk a little bit about, yeah, like, people get mad at ordinals because it's not a financial transaction, and it's taking up block space. My view on it has kind of, I love Bitcoin. I love it. And, I know it's a revolutionary invention, and I think it's super important that money is decentralized. But to me, what I've come to realize is, what's really valuable about Bitcoin is this block space. Like the block space is this truly decentralized, space, like a ledger that's that is secured by like all the miners, and like it's the most secure proof of work blockchain. But so the space has value. And in my mind, the way that I'm thinking about it is like, money is the first killer app that made use of this space. Money is, and it's really important, super important. But I think naming is super important, and I think it can use this space also. And why shouldn't it be able to? I don't think it takes away from money. If we designed it really carefully to have a very light footprint, on it. Like it hardly uses much space at all. And it's really limited to what's done on the top level, like on Bitcoin. So, but in my mind, that space is so valuable. It's valuable because it's truly decentralized ledger, like super, in the most in the world, the most decentralized space that anybody can use, for a fee. And we rightfully put money on there. Money was the first killer app, but I think naming is super important and deserves I think it could use that space also. I think that space is can be used for other really important things. So anyway, we designed it, yeah, to be really lightweight in that point. And then your second point was, yeah, like uh, about integrating. Was that your second? What was your second question?
I gotta think about it, but right now you basically made me consider this potential issue. Whenever a domain is registered to someone, which is going to be a Bitcoin address, that's going to be an on-chain transaction. And whenever they issue subdomains from it, there's going to be another on-chain transaction, right?
No. Well, no, it's the subspaces are done with zero knowledge proof. So like it's a tree, that we do it all off chain. Um, we could commit on chain some, like we have if you go to our GitHub, you can see this proof of concept subspacer that we have, where we use risk zero to create like uh I think like the ZK snark proof, which you could commit that on chain just to prove, the changes that have been, just to prove what subspace, the changes to the subspaces and stuff. But we purposely designed this to be super scalable. So like you can't have hundreds, like just domain names have 300 million domain names registered right now on the internet, something like that. And you can't have that on Bitcoin. Like it's just you would, it's just not possible to scale it. So we've really we've scaled it by doing the top layer and the second layer, and the top layer is done on Bitcoin. And so that's really limited to just 10 a day. So like 3,600 top level spaces are done on the Bitcoin blockchain, and everything else is scaled uh, off chain, like using the zero knowledge proofs.
That actually sounds cool and makes a lot of sense. It sounds even more scalable than open timestamps, which is something else that's right now a non-monetary use that is not contentious. So if it's gonna be done with zero knowledge proofs, the footprint on the blockchain is gonna be negligible. I don't think having a lot of demand for domains is gonna boost transaction fees for those who want to do remittances on Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we designed it. There's no changes necessary to the Bitcoin protocol. It's running just as Bitcoin is now, but scaling, and it's really light footprint, lightweight, like really small footprint on Bitcoin block space. But it's anchored in that space, which gives it the security and decentralization that it, you know. And so, yeah, I remember your first question, which was like about communities adopting it and stuff. And my hope is that the Bitcoin, I'm hoping the Bitcoin community can get on board with this because it's built on Bitcoin and it's built for Bitcoin. There's a lot of use cases where this could help build Bitcoin. Like it's a security risk. It's a risk to rely on domain names because they're totally centralized, and you don't want to have to trust. Like that goes against the whole, Bitcoin philosophy. You don't want to have to trust. So you don't want to have to trust these third-party certificate authorities to like give you something to sign with. So yeah, I'm hoping the Bitcoin community really helps us build this out. And I've been going to these BitDev meetups, and uh there's some people there that are super uh they they don't like how ordinals are using the space, and some of those people have said to me, like, this is the only thing built on Bitcoin that I see that has value. And so I think they get it. I think they understand how it can help Bitcoin, and, that it's built in a smart way. So my hope is that, you know, the Bitcoin community adopts it.
Once again, when did you say that you expect the mainnet launch for the Spaces protocol?
I'm hoping in the next month or so, but, you can follow us like on Twitter. It's at Spaces Protocol. Also, we're on Telegram, which you can find all our stuff on spacesprotocol.org. But yeah, we'll definitely be putting updates there. But yeah, I'm hoping in the next month or so. I mean, we're doing testing now. We have an Explorer. If you go to explorer.spacesprotocol.org, you can see like spaces currently in auction and stuff, uh, on testnet 4. So we're doing a lot of testing, and we're writing a lot of tests for our software, and everything's going well. I mean, everything seems to be running smoothly. So um, yeah, my hope is to launch on mainnet in the next month or so.
Right now, I'm looking at the impervious.com webpage, and you seem to have 6 different projects from badass domains to beacon browser, fingertip, forever IDs, impervious domains, and the top one is Spaces Protocol, which we discussed mostly during this interview. And I was wondering if there's any one of the other 5 that you think is worth mentioning and discussing.
A lot of this other stuff was built for when we first started out, is we were building for Handshake and ENS. So I mean, personally think beacon browser is cool, but uh, it's not like set up for spaces yet. But it was the first browser that used Dane, that's can resolve Dane. So it's what that means is it's also the first browser that could resolve .eth domains with DNS without like a redirect or anything like that. It actually used true DNS, so you could actually do an HTTPS for a .eth domain without a trusted third-party certificate authority. So yeah, it's the first browser that resolves with Dane, which means that you could have encrypted traffic, HTTPS, without relying on a trusted third-party certificate authority. You could create the keys. You have the keys. Nobody else has the keys to encrypt that traffic, which is, I think, like super important, and is a big reason why I think, we did spaces and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, but yeah, spaces right now has been our main focus for the last year and a half. We've been 100% focused on spaces.
So, for the people who are looking for ways to keep up with spaces and be there on day one and register all the domains that they want, what's the best way to follow the Spaces project?
Well, if you go to spacesprotocol.org, we have a link in the top right to our Telegram. I think that's probably the best way is on Telegram, because we'll definitely be updating there. And especially if you have any questions or anything like that, we could answer them. Also on Twitter, we'll announce anything there also. So yeah, the Twitter/Spaces protocol, and our Telegram, which I think is t.me/Spaces protocol.
And on a personal level, I was going to ask you if you can make your hair from the Twitter profile picture because it's super cool. If you can get that hairdo.
Sure. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, some people tell me that I have the best hair in Bitcoin. I feel like there's competition here, so
Well,
I
you know
had to
what?
ask.
Somebody said I have the best hair in the domain name industry. So hey, look, we're two of the best hair guys on on a podcast.
Yeah, it's nice. I gotta give you that. And that picture looks impressive. There's that stunning feel. Like you're like, okay, that's something I respect.
Yeah, thanks.
So, how can people follow you personally and keep up with whatever you're doing? And why should people still care about Friendster in 2024?
Yeah. So you can follow me on, I guess Twitter is the best way. You can get to my Twitter by going to cypherpunk.com. I got that domain, so cypherpunk.com will redirect to my Twitter for now. But yeah, Friendster, I don't know. It's just I've been into the domain industry for a while, so I just follow domain names, and Park.io originally it was a drop catching service. So what that means is that when domain names expired, uh, there's a lot of competition to get these domain names if they're valuable. Like some valuable domain names can expire, and there's a lot of competition to get them the exact second, like less than a second that they become available. And so we wrote a lot of scripts to get them, and basically that was our service, selling that on our website. And so through all that, I really got to know like expiring domain names, and so Friendster.com expired, and somebody else got it, but I was able to get it from them. And also their trademark, they abandoned their trademark, so we got the trademark. So anyway, yeah, I want to bring Friendster back. I think right now is a good time. So this is my other project besides Spaces, is Friendster. A lot of people are kind of anti-social network for good reasons, because they sell all your data and they manipulate you with ad algorithms to make you depressed and isolated, anxious, and like, so there's a lot. And there's even a study where like people would pay to no longer be on some of these social networks. They'd pay money to no longer be, but they don't want to do it because they're afraid they'll miss out. Um, so anyway, I thought it might be fun to bring Friendster back and make it a place where you don't sell, it doesn't sell your data. It puts users first, basically. It puts users first, and maybe there'll be some way. I'm hoping there'll be some way to tie this into Spaces, like each user gets their own uh, decentralized spaces, like subspace username, like at Friendster or something. Um, there's been a lot of interest. I mean, it's crazy. Like we we've slowly been opening it up, but there's like uh, around 250,000 people still on the waiting list to get in, and so yeah, that's mostly I think it's just fun. I liked Friendster when it first came out. It was the first thing of its kind, and I thought it was really cool and interesting. So I thought it'd be fun to do it again.
Yeah, I think at the time the narrative was that it's Napster for friends, and that's
Yeah,
why they called it Friendster. There was
yeah,
no concept of social media or social network or whatever. It was just Napster for friends. And I can't talk anymore. The revolutionary part about Friendster was how you could create these circles with people. And I think Google, I don't recall the name of the service. It might have been Circles. But Google at one point in 2011, 2012, they created this social network that was all about putting people close to you in different circles. And you had a circle for your family, a circle for your friends, and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it's funny how I think Friendster came in 2003, 2004,
yeah,
and it took Google about 8 years to copy this formula, and they still failed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah. We'll see how it goes. Huh?
If you can get MySpace, I think that one is also nostalgic. Or Hi5. In Romania, Hi5 was the shit. Before Facebook, everyone had Hi5.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But it was fun. You could actually learn how to program in HTML and maybe some PHP because everyone
Yeah,
wanted to have the funny animated page and have a song playing in the background and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. The customizable like templates and stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
The internet used to be more fun.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I want to. Yeah, I know. Uh, hopefully we can bring it back to the fun days.
And that's
That's
actually a brilliant idea. If you have a user base on Friendster, you can onboard them to Bitcoin domains with spaces and bring more people to Bitcoin. Because I guess developers are excited about this, but I'm not sure about Bitcoin users. And they're gonna follow the network effect. So if you do have some people who don't care much about Bitcoin, but they see value in domains, and they're gonna join Bitcoin, then the Bitcoiners will follow along. And I think that's what sets your project apart from all the others.
thanks. Yeah, yeah. I'm hoping that it can onboard like, you know, lot more people onto Bitcoin.
I'm not sure if I have any more questions for you at this time. I think it's super cool what you're doing with Spaces, and I hope that everyone listening, we've had about almost 400 people listening on live stream, which is nice. I hope that they give it a try and they check out the website, which is on impervious.com, and that's where you find information about the Spaces protocol. It's on the Bitcoin mainnet 4,
Yeah,
and you
test.
can give it a try.
Yeah, yeah. Test it out on testnet 4 and download the software and try it out. It's pretty easy to get started. You can get coins, from a faucet pretty easily for testnet 4 and start bidding and stuff. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really am honored to be on your podcast. I love your podcast. So thanks so much.
I love your work, so that's, I guess, the admiration is mutual. Thank you very much for your time. And I know I was late about 30 minutes. I apologize for that.
No
I hope
problem.
we had a great show regardless. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the
Thanks.
next one.
Okay. Thanks.